Imagine this for a moment. You lose your father, your mother, and your 16-year-old daughter all within 4 years. Most of us can't imagine surviving that kind of grief. But Kate Doerge doesn't have to imagine it because she's lived it. And somehow, instead of letting that grief swallow her whole, she found a way to turn it into purpose. She chose not to let grief define her. She let love do that instead. And today she's here to share just how she did it and why she believes we all have the ability to reimagine life after loss. As Kate will remind us, it's not about your lifespan, it's about your wingspan. This conversation is for you if you are ready to turn your grief into growth, your pain into purpose, and to find a way to celebrate life colorfully, even after staggering loss. Kate Doerge, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you here and to have this conversation.
I'm so honored and thrilled to be here and so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Grief and loss have a way of splitting life and time into before and after. And we're going to dive into the after, but I really want to take a step back and go to the before and find out a little bit about your childhood and what little Kate was like. I know we've talked about your parents. Your dad was a Marine. He was a devout Catholic. He seemed larger than life. And your mom was a belly dancer and a fitness enthusiast.
Yeah.
And you say she's joy personified.
Yeah.
What was little Kate like?
I grew up in Bedford, New York, outside north of New York City in Westchester County, and lived a big, beautiful life with two older brothers. So I was raised, sort of as this scrappy yet girly little girl out in the suburbs of New York City, and my upbringing is really what has defined me as who I am today and what I take through all the decisions I make in my life. And I do talk about my mom and my dad being such incredible role models for me. My dad was larger than life. He had been a Marine. He studied to be a priest. He's the one who taught me how to cook, even though I'm not a great cook. He had a garden. He taught me how to sew. He taught me how to do 100 push-ups and 100 pull-ups and wind sprints to beat my brothers. And my mom was the biggest, brightest, most beautiful light. So I had this dad who was so physically strong and this mother who was so positively beautiful in that she approached every day, living it to the fullest and glass, not even half full, but all the way full. As a jazzercise instructor, belly dancer, and a fitness enthusiast. So I had these wonderful role models who set sort of the stage and set the path for me.
It's incredible. Did
Yeah.
little Kate ever envision future Kate? Like, did you ever want to get married, have kids, or were you just scrappy with the boys, not?
I was a girly girl. I think
You
I was scrappy, but also had the sensitive side. So I really did have sort of I think the best of both of my parents in that foundation. Um, did I know where I'd be now? No, but I certainly had a love for fashion and all things sort of dress up and connecting with people. So
Yeah.
I was probably the kid in class, not probably, I was the teacher report cards that were like, she talks a lot. If she didn't talk so much, maybe she would be doing X, Y, and Z. But I was an overachiever in class and socially, I just wanted to be with people and connect, whether it was in the classroom, on the field, on weekends. I had a little book of who I'd play with on, at the playground, and I would schedule my budget. So like it started early
Wow, that's
as a
amazing.
connector. So that was little Kate that um, I was an entrepreneur too. I would like teach my own little fitness classes to little kids on the weekends because I saw my mom. I would go, she was such a role model. So I just wanted to emulate
Yeah.
what she was doing and how she was living her life.
Wow. This explains so much. So,
Right?
so
Just,
much of the story we're gonna go
yeah,
into. I'm
exactly,
so glad
right?
we're going into before. Okay, fast forward. You're in your 20s now. You're a young adult. This is way before life got more complex. What were you like then? What were you thinking your future was going to look like?
It's so interesting because I think even from little Kate to fast forward going through high school, I went to a boarding school, Tabor Academy, then I went to Hamilton College, and I always wanted to do something big and make an impact. Even at Tabor, at high school, I was like, I want to be the leader of, you know, the captain of the team, and I want to be the, dorm lead, and I want, so I just was sort of like setting the bar higher and higher for myself in a way that I didn't even realize. And so by the time I got to New York City, and again, I had been in art history and a Spanish major, but I loved fashion and I loved, again, connecting with people. So I was really fortunate to have been introduced to two young women who had started a public relations firm in New York City. I was going in for an informational interview and they hired me. It was my
Mhm.
first interview. Fast forward to 21 years later, I was still at that same agency because we ended up selling it. We, grew
Mhm.
it. But that's where I started. And even then, I felt like I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. How can I go big?
Yeah, you were there 21 years, like you said. You were producing these fashion shows, you were working
Yep.
with celebrities. It was probably what I imagine go, 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 very
Yeah.
energizing, but you did have that whisper that you had earlier on in life that was saying, Kate, there's more. Like,
Yeah.
there's more. I got to do more.
Yeah. And I didn't, it's so funny because it sort of was just sort of innately inside of me that in any client that I worked with, in any brand we were launching, in any fashion show I was working on, I just felt like, okay, this is great, but what more is out there?
Yeah.
And I kept going, and it was incredible. It was a very glamorous life, especially, pre-marriage, pre-kids, living in downtown New York City and in West Village and traveling the world
Best.
fashion shows. And it was
Best.
the best.
So you meet Chad, your now husband, and we're gonna fast forward to your wedding day.
Yeah.
Beautiful
So,
celebration. We're
yep.
excited. Dad pulls you and Chad aside and
Yeah.
uses very specific language with you all and
Yeah.
says, you've lived the most charmed life, but you will be challenged, and it's up to you how you play the cards you're dealt. Do you think this is like typical dad, like life is gonna get hard, Kate? Or do you feel like he knew something more?
I think, first of all, that was the greatest advice I'd ever received in my life, even though I didn't know it at the time. But it was so much about my dad and his intuitiveness and his faith that he carried through his whole life and the faith that he had instilled in me as little Kate through my life. But he was right. We were living this big, beautiful life, and we had Chad was in finance, I was in fashion. At our wedding, we had 350 people, and it was beautiful. But we needed that moment to be told, it's not always going to be this way. And
Mhm.
it's going to be up to you how you play the cards you're dealt in life. And as we sort of move through my story, it was the greatest advice because it is what has stuck with me through every challenge, through every adversity, through every loss that have I have faced because we all have a choice on how we play the cards we're dealt.
Well, then the two of you go on to have three beautiful children, Henry, Penny, and Frankie. Can you just give us a quick description of each of your children?
Oh my gosh. Well, they're each so different,
I
which is why
imagine.
it's
Yeah.
so beautiful. And I love so much, because people do say no one has a favorite, but I have a favorite in terms of each one of their personalities and what they have all brought to the table. Henry was born in 2024, which feels like it was forever ago, as he's now 21 years old. And he was our first, born in New York City, lived in our little dining room that we converted into his little bedroom. And we lived on 12th Street, and he was mischievous and funny and, loyal and loving and, exactly who he is today. He was early on, and then hilarious in that sense. And so that's Henry. And then 2.5 years after Henry was born, Penny arrived, bounding into this world with big, bright, beautiful energy. Similar to my mom, just like the brightest lights, such a girly girl. Huge sparkly smile, creative, really funny, total prankster, and just a whirlwind of girliness all packed into one.
Mhm.
Penny, which we'll talk about, and then Frankie was born 2.5 years after Penny, and he was like a bull in the china shop from day one, and hilarious and sensitive but loving and just so much fun. And he was like this big ball of energy, super athletic. While Henry's athletic, he's more into music, and Frankie's more into just again like bull in a china shop, ready to go. So different, all three of
I
them.
love it. I love
Yeah,
it. When Penny was 14 months old, she falls off your bed. You take her to the hospital. You later find out she's diagnosed with neurofibromatosis, which is a
not easy to
genetic, in,
pronounce.
no,
Yeah.
and there's no cure for it. For those who do not know what NF is, can you give us a little description? And also, what was that moment like for you in your mind, your body? What
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, she was actually, if you can believe it, she was actually 4 months old. And
Four.
yeah, four. And
Oh, I
she
thought she was
was,
14.
no, no. If it's just, it's so crazy to think about that because she was so tiny, 4 months old, and she rolled off our bed, and I heard this thud. I was getting dressed for work, and I was in the bathroom, and she had been in the middle of our king size bed. So how she just rolled, I still to this day, I'm like, how did that happen? But I heard this thud. I raced out. I picked her up, and her leg was very hot to the touch. And she wasn't even crying at that time. And so I raced her to our pediatrician. And the pediatrician took one look, and she was like, "You got to get up to hospital for special surgery. And this looks like it's fractured." And so I raced up there, and Roger Widman, who was the head of orthopedic pediatric department at the time, took one look at it, and he's like, "This is a fracture. Let's get our x-rays." And when he saw the x-rays, he said to us, "Not only is this a fracture, but it is something called congenital pseudarthrosis, which is the bowing of the tibia bone." And so what we didn't realize when we had walked into that office is that her bone had been bowed prior to even the fracture.
Mm,
And 1 out of 300,000 kids have this. And because it's so rare, they really only see it under this umbrella of this neurofibromatosis. And NF is it is the most common genetic condition in the United States, affecting 1 out of 2,000 people. 150,000 people have it. And just in comparison to ALS that everyone knows about, ALS, 30,000 people have it. So when we were even told that this was a possibility, that we had never heard of NF. We didn't neurofibroma. What? We were like, I
mm,
don't even know how to pronounce that. And so for us, we had to focus on Penny's leg and back to how you play the cards you're dealt. When we
mhm,
were told this is congenital pseudarthrosis, 1 out of 300,000 kids have this. We think it's under this umbrella of NF. Chad and I just looked at each other and we were like, okay, this is that moment that this was that real moment
mhm,
that dad was, referring to. And we were like, well, let's go. Let's make sure we, take care of her, and we're going to do surgery to try to fuse the bone, and she's going to wear a brace, but we're going to bedazzle it,
mhm,
and we're not going to let this define us or Penny. And that was the beginning of Penny's big, beautiful journey, that her life was not defined
mhm,
by this NF diagnosis. We did get her tested because NF, you have to have genetic testing.
mhm.
And she didn't have any other symptoms other than a few cafe au lait spots. Because just one thing about NF is that it does affect everyone differently. Because under the umbrella of NF, you can have a multitude of symptoms or none or very
Mhm.
few. And NF is the growth of tumors anywhere along the nerve pathways. So it manifests tumors on your optic nerves, your hearing, tumors topically. You can also have bone abnormalities, cognitive issues, cafe au lait spots. So for Penny, it was the bone abnormality.
Did you, Chad, or Henry at the time need to get checked, or was it you kind of were past that point? You would have known. Like,
Yeah, we were past exactly. We were past. I mean, we really didn't have any
okay.
signs, and NF can be a random genetic mutation. So 50% of the time, it's totally random.
Mhm.
50% it's passed on. So for us, we did not have the gene. No one else in our family had the gene. So this
Wow.
was
Wow. You talked about Penny, and she was such a light and such a girly girl and a prankster. She would prank her brothers,
yeah.
full of life. What I have learned about her through you and through others is Penny was alive. She didn't just live, she was alive. What do you think she knew about life that most of us don't?
Yeah, I love that question because I think it's such a beautiful lesson for all of us. And that is what has inspired me to keep her legacy alive. I'm going to talk about her story because throughout her entire life, as I said, she was not defined by this brace. She was not defined by an NF diagnosis. We didn't even talk about it because she just was Penny and she led with such positivity and bravery and kindness and humor that people just were like attracted to her. They wanted to be with her. Little kids, she ran this glam camp and she was such a Pied Piper to these kids. And I think her friends also appreciated the fact that she wasn't that one to get like stuck in the drama of
Right.
girls and especially teen girls. She remained very inclusive. And I don't know if it was just intuitively. I think a little bit of that came from a place that she must have known she was living her life's purpose. Um, because she lived life in such a beautiful way that it only makes sense now that she's with us in a different shape and form, that was her purpose here on earth, was to teach us that and to keep this legacy alive and keep spreading that.
Yeah. She really is such a light. I
Oh
didn't
my,
know her personally, but just even seeing all of her videos and hearing about her, I'm like, special.
yeah,
Like
she,
so, so, so special. Let's talk about, you just mentioned glam camp. And she would tell her doctors that she has a commitment, camp is starting, and most people would have canceled everything, but she continued to show up for life and she continued to show up for others. Where,
she did, yeah.
yeah, where do you think she
I,
got,
you
do
know,
you think it's because she did know this was her purpose?
I think, going back to and thinking about she lived, 14 years, right? But this brace on her leg that she bedazzled and she had 7 leg surgeries. So every time she got a cast, we would put sequins on it and make sure it was pink. And after each of those surgeries, as I said, like she was never defined by any of those. So she had built this foundation up that it was sort of the norm that you go to the hospital and then we fly to Florida and we're there and we cover her
Mhm.
cast and she goes to the beach. Or, it was
Yeah,
just like so normal
yeah.
to have those moments that I think by the time in the fall of 2020, when I back up to when Penny was first diagnosed with a brain tumor, because that's really what it was that she had a little bit of this wandering eye and we saw it and we took her to go see her ophthalmologist and he looked at it and he was like, this may be related to COVID because kids were spending so much time on the screens that they were weakening their eye muscles. And he said, let's have her checked out. Let's send her to get an MRI. And in hindsight, he also was like, well, We'll book the appointment for you all. We'll let you know when it's happening. And then when we got the call, it was the next day. We're like, huh, all right.
Mhm.
Well, I guess this is important enough. And that's when we got the call after the reading of the MRI that she, in fact, had a brain tumor. So that was the start of it all. Because in 2020, when we had to go racing after that MRI to have that first brain tumor removed, is when we started to recognize it was no longer just her leg we were focusing on. Now it was bigger. And that first tumor was benign. But once again, we were like, all right, we're just going to get it in and we're going to get it out. And Penny was
Mhm.
like, okay. And then she was back to school.
Mhm.
And then when it came back over and over again, it was just the same thing where we were like, we're going to get in, we're going to take it out, and we're going to go. And Penny, through all of those moments leading up to when, probably after the second, third brain surgery, she had this proton therapy treatment. Um, and it was Upper East New York City, and we would have to drive into the city. So, to your point about making the decision to book those proton treatments early in the morning so that she could come back out to Long Island and run her glam camp that she had for these little girls. So Penny was very determined to make sure, similar to her life was not defined by these moments. She had a commitment to these little girls that
Mhm.
she was a counselor and she was running this camp during summer. And so she was going to be there. And she never talked about what she had been through that morning. She just was back, she was running camp, and she just moved through it, which
Mhm.
was unbelievable.
Did she ever ask about death? Did she ever talk about it? Did she have a fear of it? Or was she just purely living?
She was living. I mean, and she really was living. It was exactly that, where it was just, we would get the MRI back that the tumor had reappeared, and to the point that, our Penny's surgeon got to a place where he'd be like, all right, Penn, what do you have on the calendar? And she'd be like, well, I've got my 16th birthday and then we're going river rafting. And he'd be like, okay, we have 10 days to squeeze this in, get you recovered, go have your 16th birthday, and then you go river rafting
Mhm.
for 10 days. So she just was living. There was never a moment where she was like, I can't. It was
Mhm.
always like, okay, we'll do this, but then I'm going to
Mhm.
do this.
Mhm.
So that was such an incredible gift to us as
Yes.
parents, and for our family as a reminder, like, we don't have to be defined by our
Mhm.
illnesses.
Mhm.
We do have a choice of how we play the cards we're dealt.
Mhm. Were you and Chad having conversations, especially when she started having these brain tumors, of, okay, maybe this is the beginning of the end? You just
Never.
also were with her and
Yeah.
lived.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine there's some parents that are listening to this and maybe they have a child who's sick or terminally ill, and it's like holding, just kind of knowing what is going on, but also just holding life and joy at, at the
Yeah.
pinnacle and living and appreciating every moment.
I think yes, and yes, and yes. I think all of that, and knowing again, we were role models to Penny. Penny was a role model to us, and so that intersection of we're going to keep moving forward because if we don't, we're going to get stuck. And the alternative to trying to find joy or trying to find a light during that dark time is really dark. And so I think we quickly recognized the difference that, when Penny had a surgery, she wanted all of her roller rabbit pajamas and she wanted her bedding and she wanted her stuffed animals. And we wanted to make sure it was big and bright and beautiful, even in the hospital room. So it started from every decision we made to make sure that we were making beautiful decisions
Mhm.
and that it was going to be light and bright. And I think through all of this, we didn't stop to talk about the what ifs. It was like live in the day, make sure you reach for the light. in
Mhm.
everything we do. And so that kept us going. And I had a friend who had given me this heart when we learned that one of the tumor had come back and the pathology report had changed because it was benign until it wasn't and it became malignant. And she gave me this heart that she had found at her church, and it was red heart and it says faith on it. And she sent that to me. And in my heart and having grown up, this was this idea of faith in something bigger than ourselves. And it's not necessarily like a religious faith, but can be a spiritual faith that we are living our life's purpose. And there's also this idea of faith over fear. So
Yes.
for us, I kept that heart by my bed, but it also became my mantra. Like I would put post-its everywhere, faith over fear, faith over fear. And it was what got me up in the morning and what helped me put my 2 feet on the ground and one foot in front of the other to just get out and go and keep going. Because I was like, faith over fear. I have to have faith knowing it's got to get me through. And it wasn't, it's got to get me through because Penny isn't going to die. It was like, just whatever's happening is happening for a reason. And we'll keep going.
There's such a beautiful acceptance of what is. And I think that a lot of us run into these more negative emotions because we're resisting what's happening. And I feel like this whole concept of faith over fear is really empowering because they're both asking you to believe in something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both faith and fear are. And it's just a beautiful shift in perspective to have that kind of mindset. We've talked about perspective a lot, and I think for anyone listening, particularly families or parents that are going through something similar and they are in the dark and they
Hmm.
want to adopt a little bit of what you did, is there like one piece of advice that you would give just to do a micro shift?
Yeah, I mean, because I think if you start, it's a mind shift, and this is what we talk about reimagining how we
Mhm.
approach life through, mental, physical, emotional stage. And it's very easy when you're going through tough times to want to lie in bed and pull your covers over your head and stay in that darkness because it's like a cocoon, right? Whether it's a safe cocoon or just a cocoon you don't want to leave. But the reality is for us, with what we were going through with Penny, not only did we have to be role models for her and how she was going to move forward, but we have two beautiful boys,
Yes,
who,
exactly.
if their sister was battling something, they didn't want to lose their sister and their parents to that. It
Mhm.
was, we had to think about others. And that
Mhm.
is hard to do when you're in that dark space,
Mhm.
because it's easy to kind of shut down. But if you have to do one small thing, it's to start to think about who else you're impacting
Yeah.
and the losses that come if your
Mhm.
family, if your kids lose you through that process.
Mhm.
So that's what I certainly kept in mind was just like we are role modeling for our kids and our community through everything we're doing, and they're following our light. And
Mhm.
so those small steps of just like get up, put your 2 feet on the ground,
Mhm.
get outside, get that sunshine,
Mhm.
makes you feel like I can do it. Whatever that I
Mhm.
can is, like,
Yeah.
just keep going.
I do want to talk about Henry and Frankie for a minute
Yeah.
because I've spoken to a couple of families that have experienced what you have experienced with Penny and caring for a sick child. Many say it can become all-consuming. It becomes your mission. And you have these two beautiful boys at home. How did you and Chad balance giving them the love and the time they needed while also figuring out all the things for Penny?
I think that's where we were such a great team together, because we would balance it. But I think that comes with parenting also. It's like if you have
Period.
more than
Yeah.
one child, like you're constantly juggling. You're going to a play for one, you're going to a sports game for another. And so, but that energy you put into caretaking for a child through surgeries, through everything, it really was a balance for the two of us and leaning on friends. So, our friends to pick up where we couldn't be, pickups, etc. But recognizing like, okay, Penny's in a body cast and she's going to be needing a lot of attention, but we also have to give the boys attention or bring them in to help with Penny. Like there was just moments of we're all in this together
Mhm.
and trying to keep life as normal as possible for them
Mhm.
so that they felt like life didn't stop.
Yeah.
They were able to go to their games. They were able to do things. We were supporting them through just their lives and
Mhm.
living their lives.
You lose your father, your mother in a freak car accident 5 days before Christmas, and you lose Penny at 16, all within 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. More like, yeah, four time frame. This
Four
is,
years?
yeah, I
Two
think
years?
that's about
4 years?
right.
I
Yeah.
keep saying
I
two.
mean, it was two between
I,
each one. It was two between each one.
okay.
But it was, listen, they all were so different, those losses. My dad was almost 80 and I talk about this all the time, but my dad, as such a devout Catholic and with having such faith, he used to tell us when we were little, like, when my time comes, time comes. And we'd be like, Dad, that's so morbid. And he'd be like, no, but I've lived my life. Like when my time comes, it comes, and I'm okay with that because I have no regrets. And that, as you know, that was a beautiful thing because when his time did come, we didn't feel like he was resisting it or he
Mhm.
wasn't ready. He was like, I'm going to a great place.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay. When my dad did pass, he, he was the one who allowed us to be able to celebrate his life because he was so okay with it. Like he was ready to pass on in that sense. And so he was the start of how we started to reimagine and approach loss in a different way.
Mhm.
And even though it was devastating because he was a role model and because he was such an incredible presence in our lives and it, rocked me to the core.
Mhm.
Um, I processed it, I think, differently, knowing that he wasn't resisting it and he wasn't scared.
He was at peace with it. He was
He was
okay.
at peace and he had left such a impact on my life that I immediately held that close, as I continued to move forward. And he was such a rock of foundation in my life and after he passed that when we got to my mom's accident, and that was 5 days before Christmas, and that was a shock. And that is very different than the passing of my dad, where we had time. It was my dad had been sick and we had a week with him in the end by his side. My mom, I talked to her that morning and that afternoon
Wow.
told that she had been in this accident and was airlifted to this hospital down in Florida. And then I was told shortly afterwards that she didn't make it. And and so that was a very different
Mhm.
loss than my dad. But similarly, my mom had lived this incredible life and big and bright and beautiful. And so we didn't want to mourn her or go so dark because she had lived such a big, bright life.
Mhm.
And so while it was a shock, and it was devastating, I also recognized it was 5 days before Christmas. And so I had a choice then as well. I got that phone call driving home from the train station back to my house where I had three beautiful children who were so excited for Christmas and so excited to go see their grandmother down in Florida. And I had to walk into the house and tell them what had happened. So, in that moment of having a choice, I had to make the choice and say, this is what happened. But you know what? We're going to celebrate her because that's what she would want. She would not want us to be mourning and sad and going into Christmas, crying and just being in such a dark place. Like, this is our moment. We got to celebrate her. And she would want us to keep going.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning of how to sort of face loss in a different way, even if that loss was so sudden and so tragic.
You use the word choice a few times, and I think it's so important, and your story is highlighting this so beautifully that we all have a choice. In every moment, we can decide how we want to show up, who we want to be,
Hmm.
and it's just instantaneous. It's incredible the way that you've been able to show up for your community and your family and all of the things. I have to ask, are there ever moments where you just take yourself aside and cry, or do you ever have a down moment?
I
Does,
mean, there's no, you know what? I always say, like, I lead with my heart. I lead with
yes,
such
you do.
gratitude
Hmm.
um, for the lessons I've learned, for the lives that my family has led. So, and I really lean on my friends, my community,
Hmm.
and others and connect in such a beautiful way that
Yeah.
there's not a moment where I feel alone. I think when you feel alone is when you go to a dark place and you have those moments. Certainly have moments of like pangs of missing
Yeah,
them.
of course.
And don't mistake me, like loss and grief is messy and it's complicated and it's confusing and all of those things. But that's where my experience of making the choice
Hmm.
to view and to get through grief in these different ways and with, the steps that I've taken has made such a difference. Um, so that's what I really lean on.
I love that. We have mutual friends, and I'm not going to get the story correct, so I would like you to share.
Yeah.
A few days, this is what I've been told, but a few days when you knew Penny was on her way to the light,
Mm.
your home was filled with people cooking and
Uh,
music and going into her room and being with her and spending time. I have never heard of this before. Can you share? Like, this is beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, it really was beautiful and it was a choice we made. And I think it also goes back to my mom and celebrating her when she had this car crash 5 days before Christmas, that was when we made the choice to celebrate her. So
yes.
instead of a sad funeral, that was the first moment where we were like, you know what, we're going to celebrate her in a big, beautiful way. Everyone's going to wear their favorite colors that Cassie wore. They're going to tell these beautiful stories. They're going to honor her in a bright light that brings people together.
Hmm.
And that idea of bringing people together, celebrating her legacy, connecting in a way that lifted people up and made us feel better. And I'm sure made her feel better,
Hmm.
knowing we were celebrating and coming together in that way. So with Penny, um, in that last week, when we had heard that final tumor would not be able to be removed, because she had already had 7 brain surgeries, we had filled our home with such love and such light and so much beauty that I think people walked in and they couldn't believe it. Like
Hmm.
we had anywhere from 50 people in our house at any one time. And it was a really beautiful way to bring people together and make Penny feel she was so loved. And we have a friend who referred to that time as sort of a love cocoon because people came in and they didn't want to leave. It was just so full of that energy. I mean, you
Hmm.
really could feel just this kinetic, positive, bright energy when you walked into the house.
Hmm.
Um, and, we even had friends say that Penny went out on a rocket ship of love because she did. She was so fueled, and we were so fueled by the love for her, that it was really, really beautiful.
Hmm. Did she know?
I think, for us, it wasn't something we talked about.
Yeah.
It was, she knew, and Chad and I say this all the time. Um, and someone else had said that they said Penny's protecting, actually, one of her doctors said she knows, but she's protecting you all.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think that was so true. I think she was
Mhm.
really looking out for us, and she was a warrior from day one.
Wow.
And, we reference NF warriors as warriors because
Mhm.
they go through a lot. And as we said, no case looks the same.
Mhm.
So they're on that road on their own
Mhm.
journey based on what they have and how NF impacts them. And I think Penny was a warrior from, 4 months old to 16 when she had her first surgery, commando crawling across the room in a body cast. She
Yeah.
was she was that warrior
Yeah.
through 7 leg surgeries, through 7 brain surgeries, chemo, radiation. Um, but she never complained. And
Yeah.
just she got through it. And
Mhm.
so I think she was protecting us in the end.
Yeah. Then you throw this big celebration of life
Yeah.
for the third time.
Yeah.
1,100 people?
Yeah, gosh, that
That's
was incredible. I
incredible.
think what it was that people were so inspired by Penny's story and her legacy, and no one knew what she had been going through because we didn't lead with that. We didn't, talk about it all the time. So I think people who learned about what Penny had been through and that she had passed wanted to be there. They wanted to be there to support us and support each other. And there's no handbook on how you lose your 16-year-old best friend or daughter
Mhm.
or sister or
Mhm.
student in your class. So we were doing it and we were like, this is, how we're going to do it. We are going to celebrate her big, beautiful life in a big, beautiful way that's
Mhm.
representative of her. And it was incredible. We said no one wears black.
Yeah.
Everyone wears color. We're going to have her most beautiful flowers. We're going to play her most favorite songs. We're going to serve her most favorite food and really honor her in that beautiful way. And
Mhm.
I think it was such a not shock, but I think it was such a new way of doing it
Mhm.
that people who showed up and who were with us
Mhm.
couldn't believe it.
Mhm.
And because of that outpouring of love and support, and just generosity and time
Mhm.
and love, Chad and I, after Penny's life celebration, that was on a Friday. We woke up probably Sunday morning and we're like, we got to do something.
Yep.
We have such um, this train is on the tracks and people want to support us. They want to support Penny. They want to share our story. And we woke up and we're like, we got to launch a foundation. It's so crazy
No big
thinking
deal.
about it now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
big
We're like,
deal.
dealing with grief and loss and our beautiful boys and our community. And we're like, yeah, we're gonna launch a foundation to find a cure for this thing.
How
But
do you
that's what
how did you start?
I mean, I always say I started with leaning in with my heart
Yeah.
and wanting to do something that had an impact, going back to the little Kate and through my career.
Mhm.
And I think that's where I recognized pretty early on through this whole process and this evolution of where I am today that it all goes back to wanting to make a difference and that I now know, like Penny, I'm living my life's purpose and I am where I
Mhm.
am today, based on what I've always wanted to do. Keeping Penny's legacy alive and raising funds needed to find a cure for the condition that took her life.
Mhm.
And so that recognition was pretty early on that we were like, okay, we're going to make an impact. We want to go
Mhm.
big. And having our friends and family and community and everyone rise up and be like, we're with you. We
Yeah.
got you. We're doing this with you.
And you're truly doing it. You've raised nearly $6 million. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it has been the most incredible journey. And when I say going back to like the 48 hours after Penny's life celebration, waking up and saying we want to do this, there's no way we could be where we are today if we didn't have the support of everyone
Mhm.
in those moments of like, we want to do this. Because everyone came on board and they were like,
Mhm.
all right, what are we going to name this? Let's bring in a lawyer who can help with launching a foundation. Let's start to spread wings. Nora O'Donnell, a dear friend of ours, brought us on CBS News,
Mhm.
a week after we launched the foundation, which was 3.5 weeks after Penny passed, um, to share Penny's story and to be able to spread wings and shine a light on this. So, yes, we have raised close to $6 million, but there's no way we could have done it without really what's transpired over the last 2.5 years, which has been this incredibly beautiful movement. And it did start back in December of 2022, as I said, 3.5 weeks,
Mhm.
pretty much 4 weeks after Penny's life celebration.
You have an incredible community, as you've mentioned, and an outpouring of love. For those who are listening who feel a little intimidated and like, I want to do this for my own child, my own family, or I just want to take one step
Yeah.
to turning my pain into purpose, what would you share with them?
It's such an incredibly important question because, as I say to everyone, it doesn't have to be launching a foundation. You don't have to create this huge movement. It can be as simple as who do you want to help in your community, in your in the world, and how do you want to do it? The smallest steps can lead to the flap of a butterfly's wing that can
Yes.
lead to a revolution. And that's where we start, where it's like, you know what? Throwing a bake sale to raise some funds for a condition, that a loved one you had lost their life from, sharing your story on social media because you have no idea how that might help someone else. And then that person shares it with someone else. And it can go in that way. So it can be, what actions can you take to be able to help yourself move forward? And by doing that, that helps. I think in today's day and age, we have so many different outlets and platforms to be able to not only tell our story, but to connect to others who may have been going through something similar.
Yes.
And those connections can lead to really incredibly powerful and impactful movements.
And you're a beautiful example of that. I know your sons say, "Mom, it's cringe," or whatever the
Yeah,
word
yeah, yeah.
is, but
Cringy, the
it's
reels.
cringy, but
Yeah,
it's true to have the courage to put yourself out there, to tell your story. That can be all it takes to
yeah,
create
yeah.
awareness and create change.
Well, and that's my hope, and that is why this is not a vanity project. And by the way, as we talked about earlier, did I have any idea of I would be where I am today, back little Kate or back in New York City? No, I had no idea. But it's been this evolution and this process, and I'm so grateful to be where I am today because I recognize with each cringy reel that I do,
They're not
you know,
cringy.
the book, that we'll talk about that I'm working on, it can and it will help other people. And as I said, knowing the difference, the decisions we have made in our lives, if I can inspire other people to live life and make these choices in this way, then I know they're going to be in a much better place
Mhm.
than the alternative.
Definitely. And you're doing so much beautiful work. You have this foundation. You're a motivational speaker. You just did a TEDx talk. You're
Yeah,
writing a book. You just submitted your manuscript.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and I want to talk about the book in just one second, but you've also launched a platform called Reimagine. Can you give our listeners a little bit of what that is? Because that's also a community you can join. And
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. Reimagine really is this idea that if we just imagine approaching life in a new way when we're facing wellness from the mental, physical, emotional state. And I talk about this a lot, having grown up with a father who was a Marine and very physically strong. That physical strength led to mental strength for me. And I know that, by getting up and getting outside and going for a walk and putting my face in the sunshine, it sets me up for routine, consistency, and a better state of mind that allows me to face challenges, adversity, and loss. So all of that is really connected. And yes, it goes back to the decisions we make and how we approach our lives and these just different decisions. So I just saw it through everything I was going through with challenges and loss. And I decided that I want to help other people and I want to be able to inspire people through my stories and what's made a difference in my life. So that's why I launched the platform, which under which the platform is my workshops, and that's via Zoom. And hopefully one day it'll be in person and we'll
Yes.
get bigger and bigger. And then it's the book. And so the book, as you said, I just submitted the manuscript to Hay House and we're publishing
Yes.
it June 2026, which is incredible. And we'll talk about the book. And then there's the newsletters that I send out as well as my hope is really just to get this message out there. And I have seen through podcasts, through social media, through newsletters, through all of these different outlets, that that's really the opportunity for me to reimagine and inspire people to reimagine. So
Mhm.
I am so excited because, you know, I did not have any idea I'd be doing this, but here I am. And it's so rewarding and it's
Mhm.
fulfilling. And it feels like this is where I'm meant to be. And this is what
Absolutely.
I'm meant to be doing.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about reimagining grief. Your
Oh my
book
gosh.
that is
Yeah.
launching with Hay House, the
Yeah.
greatest publisher for transformational work. Congratulations. It's
Thank
huge.
you. It is so exciting. And I laugh because honestly, as I said, like I had no idea I'd be doing this. And if you had asked me 2 years ago or a little over a year and a half ago, I'd be like, what? Write a book? I barely read books. Like, you know, and my publisher and agent's always like, I don't know if you should say that. I'm like, actually, I am going to say that because if you're passionate enough about something, you can do anything. You can write a book and I telling all those readers and those who are passionate about something out there, you can do it if you put your mind to it. And for me, um, I didn't realize that my story could help other people. So when I had a conversation, I was introduced to my ghostwriter, my co-writer, Sarah Bliss, who's an incredible human being. Through a friend, we had been connected because she wanted me to help Sarah. And in return, in this conversation, Sarah was the one who said to me, "You got to tell your story." And I was like, "Really? What are people going to get from my story?" And she said, "Well, this is what I do. I help with story writing and telling, and I'm a ghostwriter." And one of the most beautiful moments was in our initial conversation. I think it was like in January or February of last year. So it was
Okay.
2024. And we were on the phone, and I, at my window, saw butterflies. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is crazy. There's a butterfly by my window on her side of the call." I was like, "Well, I have one here." She was like, "Whoa." And then she was talking about the loss of her sister. And I said, I'm so sorry. What was her name?" And she was like, "Cassie," which was my mother's name. So it was just like
Oh,
these
all
signs
beautiful
that
synchronicities and
yeah, that
synchronicities.
led to our beautiful story, which was a journey of
Mhm.
putting this together and,
Mhm.
signing an agent and then realizing, wait, this isn't the pitch that we're meant to have, and finding a new agent and then putting together the pitch and proposal and going out in January and then signing with Hay House pretty soon afterwards, and then finalizing the deal in April, and here it is in July, and we've just submitted the manuscript. So it was incredible, the journey, but it really is reimagining grief because when I was going through grief, I kept receiving these books that were telling me to be angry and in denial and that I was going to be
Mhm.
depressed. And it was so depressing. And all I wanted to feel was that I was connecting with my lost loved one. I was celebrating them. I was
Mhm.
honoring them. I was seeing signs and
Mhm.
connecting with them in a beautiful way. And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be, and everything we did, I think, we soon recognized we were teaching people a new way. And so reimagine grief is allowing people to imagine a new way through grief and shining a light for them when it's the darkest of times. And
Mhm.
the difference that can make in those choices we make
Mhm.
is really incredible. And so I have reimagined those somewhat archaic 5 stages of grief
Mhm.
to be a beautiful new way forward.
I hear you say often, like, let the light in. And I feel when you're in your darkest and your heart feels like it's breaking so you can let that light in. And you
Yes,
can
yeah.
make that choice to do that. And it's so, so beautiful. And let's talk about connection. So, connecting to your loved one. Let's talk about signs. Let's get
Oh
into it
my
because I,
gosh.
I
Yeah.
feel like whether you believe in anything or not, I do feel if you are open to this idea of connection to your loved ones on the other side, it can bring so much peace and joy and magic and confirmation into your life.
No, I love this part of the conversation so much because, I so often say, someone didn't die, they passed away. And for me, passing to the other side, truly the veil between here and there, whatever you believe there to be, is very thin. And, obviously, growing up as a devout Catholic, there was faith in that. And so for me to be able to have faith that, you know, my dad, my mom, Penny are still with me, but in a different shape and form, is really incredible because I feel this connection. And, it started probably with my dad, early on because he was such a role model and such a rock to me that, I sort of sought him out where I was like, I just want to feel you're here. I don't want to lose you completely. That idea of like physically someone you've loved is gone.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, what now? And so, I'll never forget the moment where I was driving, shortly after my father had passed, and all of a sudden I just like had this wave of feeling him with me.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget, I was driving and I squeezed one of my hands because I always used to hold his hand really tightly. And I felt him with
Yeah.
me. And it was just this passing moment that I was like, okay, you're here. And I'm going to talk to you, but you're not going to talk to me back, but I feel you with me. And with my mom, it was the same way because she was such a bright light. It was like I would go outside and I'd see the sunshine or I'd see rainbows. And, I would talk to her and I'd be like, I really need you. And there was just this feeling like she was here. Um, and so the signs, like actual signs, because people talk about, you know, feathers that they see, like,
Cardinals.
cardinals.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's like sort of the animals, and then there's the
Hmm.
nature, and then there's smoke, people say, smoke alarms,
Yeah.
um, and lightning, whatever it might be. And so the signs, I think, for Penny were the ones that came sort of most fast and furious and so evident. And that was probably because in the last week of her life, somehow the butterflies, it was November, but there was like butterflies outside of her window. It was a very unusually
Mhm.
warm November. And so butterflies were all around. And then she had butterflies in her room, and on the back of her phone there was butterflies. And so it just in the last week of her life, we were just seeing butterflies, and she wore butterfly necklace every day of her life, and I wear it now. So butterflies just like came immediately.
Mhm.
And and that is why Penny's flight, her wingspan, and certainly, it's your wingspan, not your lifespan that we talk about, because she lived more in her big 16 years of her life than most people do in 100 with the legacy she's left behind. Um, but I see butterflies everywhere. Like I feel like I'm a crazy butterfly lady because I feel like everyone sends me butterflies. They'll DM me pictures of like butterflies on dresses and but it was really after Penny passed that we had so many friends who were like, "Oh my gosh, I've been driving around town and I'm stuck behind this Jeep that is this huge blue butterfly on the back of it." And then, someone else is like, "I'm walking down the street and I see a glimmer in the grass and I turn over a little dog tag that had must have fallen off a dog and there's the name Penny." Like it was to the point people were losing their minds because they were like, "Oh my gosh, she's everywhere."
Hmm.
There's signs everywhere. And it just was so beautiful because I think immediately after such a tragic loss in a community of a young
Hmm.
teenager, for people to see these signs and then it just
Yes.
grew and grew. And people who didn't even know her were traveling around being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in Vienna and there's butterflies everywhere. I'm, in Paris and the latest fashion collection, there's butterflies everywhere." So that was really beautiful.
It truly is a butterfly effect because there are so many individuals that are part of your life that are seeing these signs that probably had no idea what a sign was, had no
Yeah.
idea that you could truly connect after the human body goes. Do you ever ask specifically for a sign? Like, hey, Pen, if I'm meant to do this, can you give me a sign of something? Have you ever asked for a sign or have you just allowed them to enter
I
your
have
space?
asked for signs. Like for my dad, I will I'll say like I really need you. And funny enough, I had a crazy story where a couple weeks ago for my book, I was working on the chapter signs and I had always thought I saw my dad in smoke alarms and fire alarms and whatever. And but people kept telling me they see cardinals, that they see red birds, and that's a big sign. And so I had that in my head. And during this week, I was kind of going through some stuff, and financially, I was like, "Oh, had to pay some bills," and I was kind of worrying about some of that stuff. I probably would have talked to my dad about, like back in the
Mhm.
day, and asked for his advice. And so back to the signs, people were talking about red bird, and on a Tuesday night, I was asleep, but in my head, I had this song that my husband loves, Chad loves, by Goose called Red Bird. And it was like on repeat in my head. And I couldn't sleep that night, or at least I didn't think that I had slept. And I woke up and I turned to him and I was like, "Gosh, does Goose have that song Red Bird?" And he was like, "Yes, you know that song." I was like, "God, it was in my head all night." And then I go downstairs and I open up the doors and I'm on my favorite little rebounder and there's this cardinal that's sitting there staring at me, red bird. Like, "Oh my gosh,
Wow.
that's crazy." And that was on a Wednesday morning. And then Thursday morning, I opened up the doors and I'm on the rebounder. There's the cardinal. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I'd never seen it before. It's like, there's the cardinal. That afternoon, I was like scrolling through Instagram and I got fed up this one Instagram post of a red bird. And it says, "If you see this red bird, it's a sign someone's, sending you abundance or something." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm
Yeah.
freaking out about this red bird." And then the next day, the red bird's there. And
Wow.
and then fast forward to I got this call and financial situation had been resolved. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is my dad. Like he's here. And this is his way of showing me." And then I haven't seen the red bird since. It's gone.
Wow.
But it's in those moments that you're like, okay, they hear you. They're
Mhm.
with you. And especially if you ask for them, like, "Show me, the signs in numbers or a song that you really love." Like Walking on Sunshine comes up all the
Yeah.
time. Pennies are on the floor all the time. There's little things that if you like stop and either ask for them to show you or you keep
Mhm.
your eyes open to it, then you really start to see the signs.
Absolutely. I think asking is so important for those who are really trying to connect and being specific.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
please give me a sign of a double rainbow, or please something that you know is not going to pop up in front of you and you're going to
Yep.
question, was
Hmm.
that them or was it not? Just be very specific and then let it go and be open to receiving. And it
Yeah.
truly does, I feel, change your life. And you can feel that you're being guided and that you
Yeah.
are being showered with love. And
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Kate, little Kate, heard a whisper. There's more I'm meant to do. Looking
Yeah.
at your life now, at the love, the loss, the legacy that you're building, do you think this was the more you were meant for, or is there still more to come?
Oh, well, the more to come is finding a cure for NF, which I know in my heart of hearts, like we will find a cure for NF, because we'll do it together. And there's just so much beauty and movement and support in that. And so that's my North Star. But my North Star is really to help others. And if I can help one person reimagine grief and loss and facing these challenges and adversity, then I know they can help someone else. And then that person helps someone else. So I'm going to keep going.
Please
So there's,
do.
yes,
Please
so there's
do.
more. There's always more, but I'm just so grateful to be in this place now, with the lessons that I've learned to be able to help others.
Yes. Okay. Last thing. There is something I believe. Some people leave this world, but their light keeps living through the people they've touched. Today's conversation is proof of that. And Kate, I also believe the people who are handed the hardest hand and still choose love are the ones who end up sharing the most light. Thank you for sharing yours and for keeping pennies alive.
I love that. Thank you. You're gonna make me cry. I love that. But
Thank
I'm
you.
a big believer in that as well. So you are shining a light and you are spreading that love, and I could not be more grateful. So
Kate,
thank
thank you
you.
for being with me today.